Then there was mines and booby traps, some civilian, some laid during our bug out west. Made a lot of sense back then. Just seed mile after mile and wait for Zach to blow himself up. Only problem is, mines don't work that way. They don't blow up a human body, they take off a leg or ankle or the family jewels. That's what they're designed for, not to kill people, but to wound them, so the Army will spend valuable resources keeping them alive, and then send them home in a wheelchair, so Ma and Pa civilian can be reminded every time they see him that maybe supporting this war isn't such a good idea. But Zach has no home, no Ma and Pa civilian. All conventional mines do is create a bunch of crippled ghouls that, if anything, just makes your job that much harder because you want them upright and easy to spot, not crawling around the weeds waiting to be stepped on like landmines themselves. You couldn't know where most mines were. A lot of the units that had set them during the retreat hadn't marked them correctly, or had lost their coordinates, or simply weren't alive anymore to tell you. And then you had all those stupid fucking Lamo jobs, the punji stakes and the tripwired shotgun shells. I lost a buddy of mine that way in a Walmart in Rochester, New York. He was born in El Salvador but grew up in Cali. You ever heard of the Boyle Heights boys? They were these hardcore LA bangers who were deported back to El Salvador because they were technically illegal. My buddy was plopped there right before the war. He fought his way back up through Mexico, all during the worst days of the panic, all on foot with nothing but a machete. He didn't have any family left, no friends, just his adopted home. He loved this country so much. Reminded me of my grandpa, you know, the whole immigrant thing. And then to catch a 12-gauge in the face, probably set by a Lamo who'd stopped breathing years before. Fucking mines and booby traps. And then you just had accidents. So many buildings had been weakened from the fighting. Throw in years of neglect, and foot after foot of snow, whole roofs collapse, no warning, whole structures just tumbling down. I lost someone else like that. She had a contact, a feral running at her across an abandoned auto garage. She fired her weapon, that's all it took. I don't know how many pounds of ice and snow brought that roof down. We were close, you know? We never did anything about it. I guess we thought we would make it official. I guess we thought we would make it easier in case something happened to one of us.
He looks over at the bleachers, smiling at his wife.
Didn't work. And then there were psych casualties, more than anything else combined. Sometimes we'd march into barricaded zones and find nothing but rat-gnawed skeletons. I'm talking about the zones that weren't overrun. The ones that fell to starvation or disease, or just feeling that tomorrow wasn't worth seeing. We once broke into a church in Kansas where it was clear the adults killed all the kids first. One guy in our platoon, an Amish guy, used to read all their suicide notes, commit them to memory, then give himself this little cut, just this tiny half-inch nick somewhere on his body so he would never forget. Crazy bastard was sliced from his neck to the bottom of his toes. When the LT found out about it, Section 8 his ass right out of there. Most of the 8 balls were later in the war. Not from the stress, though, you understand, but from the lack of it. We all knew it would be over soon, and I think a lot of people who've been holding it together for so long must have had that little voice that said, "Hey, buddy, it's cool now. You can let go." I knew this one guy, massive Roidosaurus. He'd been a professional wrestler before the war. We were walking up the freeway near Pulaski, New York, when the wind picked up the scent of a jackknifed big rig. It'd been loaded with bottles of perfume, nothing fancy, just cheap strip mall scent. He froze and started bawling like a kid, couldn't stop. He was this monster with a 2 grand body count, a guy who'd once picked up a G and used it as a club for hand-to-hand combat. 4 of us had to carry him out on a stretcher. We figured the perfume must have reminded him of someone. We never found out who. Another guy, nothing special about him, late 40s, balding, bit of a paunch, as much as anyone could have back then, the kind of face you'd see in a pre-war heartburn commercial. We were in Hammond, Indiana, scouting defenses for the siege of Chicago. He spied a house at the end of a deserted street, just a little nondescript nothing, completely intact except for boarded-up windows and a crashed-in front door. He got a look on his face, a grin. We should have known way before he dropped out of formation, before we heard the shot. He was sitting in the living room in this worn old easy chair, Sir between his knees, that smile still on his face. I looked up at the pictures on the mantelpiece. It was his home. Those were extreme examples, ones that even I could have guessed. A lot of the others you just never knew. For me, it wasn't just who was cracking up, but who wasn't. Does that make sense? One night in Portland, Maine, we were in Deering Oaks Park, policing piles of bleach bones that had been there since the panic. Two grunts pick up these skulls and start doing this skit. The one from Free to Be You and Me, the two babies. I only recognized it because my big brother had the record. It was a little before my time. Some of the older grunts, the Xers, they loved it. A little crowd started gathering, everyone just laughing and howling at these two skulls. Hi, I'm a baby. Well, what do you think I am, a loaf of bread? And when it was over, everyone just spontaneously burst into song. There's a land that I see, playing femurs like goddamn banjos. I looked across the crowd to one of our company shrinks. I could never pronounce his real name, Dr. Chandra something. I made eye contact and gave him this look like, hey doc, they're all nut jobs, right? He must have known what my eyes were asking because he just smiled back and shook his head. That really spooked me. I mean, if the ones who were acting loopy weren't, then how did you know who'd really lost it? Our squad leader, you'd actually probably recognize her. She was in the Battle of the Five Colleges. Remember the tall Amazon chick with the ditch blade, the one who sang that song? She didn't look like she used to in the movie. She'd burned off her curves and a crew cut replaced all that long, thick, shiny black hair. She was a good squad leader, Sergeant Avalon. One day we found a turtle in a field. Turtles were like unicorns back then. You hardly saw them anymore. Avalon got this look, I don't know, like a kid. She smiled. She never smiled. I heard her whisper something to the turtle. I thought it was gibberish. Mitakuye oyasin. I found out later it was Lakota for all my relations. I didn't even know she was part Sioux. She never talked about it, about anything about her. And suddenly, like a ghost, there was Dr. Chandra with that arm he always put around their shoulders and that soft, no-big-deal offer of, come on, Sarge, let's grab a cup of coffee. That was the same day the president died. He must have also heard that little voice. Hey, buddy, it's cool now. You can let go. I know a lot of people who weren't so into the VP, like there was no way he could replace the big guy. I really felt for him, mainly because I was now in the same position. With Avalon gone, I was squad leader. It didn't matter that the war was almost over. There were still so many battles along the way, so many good people to say goodbye to. By the time we reached Yonkers, I was the last of the old gang from Hope. I don't know how I felt, passing all that rusting wreckage, the abandoned tanks, the crushed news vans, the human remains. I don't think I felt much of anything. Too much to do when you're squad leader, too many new faces to take care of. I could feel Dr. Chandra's eyes boring into me. He never came over, though, never let on that there was anything wrong. When we boarded the barges on the banks of the Hudson, we managed to lock eyes. He just smiled and shook his head. I'd made it.